The GOP still looking to pass its health care legislation despite opposition from 9 Republican senators. Senator Rand Paul criticized the bill for its spending. Watch this.
So, I mean, the bill is just being lit up like a Christmas tree full of billion-dollar ornaments, and it's not repealed. We don't repeal the regulations. We don't repeal the subsidies. Now there are Republicans getting so weak-kneed, they're saying, oh, we're afraid to repeal the taxes. What happened to these people? They all were for repealing Obamacare. Now there's virtually no one left.
This as President Trump seemed to endorse first repealing the Affordable Care Act and then passing new legislation later if the Senate fails to pass a replacement. Joining me now is former Texas Congressman and former Republican presidential candidate Dr. Ron Paul. Senator, what do you make of your son's comments on the GOP downfall, if you will?
I agree. No doubt I agree. But I also understand the system, I'm sure he does too, that it's very, very difficult, and that is the problem. How do you reverse things? And this isn't just reversing Obamacare. This is reversing a principle that government should be involved in our lives to the extent it is, especially in medical care. And Republicans have never been good at that. They have expanded government medical care all along. So it's the principle on whether they should be involved. Once it gets massive and abusive and outrageous like Obamacare, there's a rebellion, but they don't rebel against the principle. They think that they can just tinker with it, and Rand's dealing with the principle of it. That this is very, very difficult.
Dr. Paul, I want to jump in here because when you say Republican principles, increasingly that is an oxymoron. When you have senators, and your son, Senator Rand Paul, pointed this out, when you have senators saying we need to keep in place a major tax increase on capital formation in this country, and Rubio has said he'd get on board with it, Senator Rounds, even Bob Corker, when you have senators saying that, they need to hand in their Republican cards.
Yeah, well, one of my beefs over the years, and it continues to be, is that we have way too much bipartisanship. And the bipartisanship is exactly what you're talking about. They both believe in government, medicine, spending, these programs. They believe in the same foreign policy. They believe in the same monetary policy. They believe in the welfare system, too. So it's very bipartisan, and they pretend there's a big difference. All we have to do is put the Republicans in, and they're going to cut taxes, cut spending, cut regulation. We're going to go back to the free market, and we're going to obey the Constitution. Well, that's a fallacy. I think we need we just had the 4th of July. I think we have to have a real revolution someday and revolt against the type of system that we've had. And I don't think it's just these, this administration or the last one. I think it's happened for 100 years. And most people realize that we just didn't get here overnight. It's the progressive principles, and it isn't Republican principles. Republicans have not been good.
Dr. Paul, it's Harlan Hill has a question for you.
Dr. Paul, so Obama knew that he couldn't get single-payer health care when they did Obamacare back in his first administration. But they knew that they could give an entitlement that people would not want to give up. And that's exactly what we're wrangling with at this point in time. So Republicans are caught in a very difficult spot where they don't want to claw something back that people have come to expect. Whether it's, pre-existing conditions or an expansion of Medicaid, Medicare. It's going to be very hard to claw that back. How do Republicans realistically contend with that? Because it's going to be unpopular to take things back from people, to arrest it.
Yeah, and it won't be all at once. I mean, you're right. There's too much dependency on it. It was deliberate because what's happening now probably doesn't bother the single-payer people. There'll be more chaos than ever, and they'll say the only thing we can do is just turn everything over to the government. So I think that they will not claw back, but what you could do is legalize bits and pieces of liberty where people can say, look, I want to opt out. I want my liberty. I want my independence. I don't need the government to take care of me from cradle to grave. Why do you force me into it? For one reason, the people who are decent have to pay for it, and that's why they won't let you. In a libertarian society, we permit voluntary socialism, but a socialist never permits voluntary freedom, and that's where the dilemma is, and they're always maneuvering, and it's not a partisan issue. There's always somebody in both parties who are behind the scenes, making these plans. There's nobody really way, other than Rand and a few others, think that maybe on principle we ought to get the government out of this and have a different system. But when I started medicine, you know, back in the early 60s, we had no Medicare, no Medicaid, and actually it wasn't all that bad. We saw nobody dying in the streets without medical care, and it existed for, you know, 150 years. I mean, it's a recent event that we've had this monster.
Lindsay, one of the dangers with Medicare, and the messaging from Democrats is going to be Medicare for all in terms of pushing us towards single payer, is it's too generous. And it's got a $50 trillion unfunded liability. The hospital trust fund goes broke in 11 years when benefits automatically get cut to 87 cents on the dollar. I mean, that's the reality of it, is that it's too generous. And if we're Lindsay, if we're doomed to go in that direction with all of health insurance in this country, we'll be bankrupt very quickly.
Oh, absolutely. This country will be bankrupt. The deficit will continue to grow. I know that's Rand's one of his major issues with this repeal legislation that the Senate is looking at right now. My question to you, Ron, is what does happen? What is the likelihood of a repeal and then a clean replace?
I don't think there's hardly any. I think Dagan's point, I think, made the point that it's all going to go bankrupt. And, yeah, they can't tinker and manage it differently. It doesn't work that way. So whether it's in the monetary system, foreign policy, or medical care, I work on the assumption, yes, I want to present the case for what we should do our best and take anything we can get. But in the meantime, prepare for the bankruptcy, because it will come and we'll have our way. We'll get rid of government medicine. But under those circumstances, more people suffer than if we just legalize, you know, the right to take care of ourselves. But people aren't willing to do that.
Ron,
so I think that we're going to see the big bankruptcy first.
Watch. Ron Paul goes on Fox, exposes both parties, calls for real revolution. Ron Paul just showed the world why he is still relevant as all the other washed-up politicians fade out years after his political career ended. He is still fighting for freedom and the people. By Matt Agarist, July 6, 2017. Champion of liberty and defender of freedom, former Congressman Dr. Ron Paul went on Fox this week to speak on the current status of the smoke and mirrors being employed by the Trump admin in their hollow claims of repealing Obamacare. Staying true to his libertarian roots, Paul transcended past the two-party shell of the show and used his time to make a powerful point: both parties are the same and it's time for a revolution. Just prior to Ron Paul coming onto the show, the host had on his son, Rand, who noted how hypocritical the Republican Party is and how they all seemingly lied to their constituencies promising them change they knew they would never fight for. After the retired doctor and congressman agreed with his son, he went on to note that the system is set up in such a way that makes it next to impossible to reverse government overreach. Very few people inside government, as Ron Paul explains, conduct their policy based on principles. Surprisingly, the host chimed in and said that the term Republican principles is increasingly becoming an oxymoron. However, the same goes for Democrats too. In Washington, the only part that wins is war. Republicans are for big government, if with war. Democrats are for war, if with big government. Advertisement. Breaking out of the healthcare theme of the show, Paul then goes on to blast both parties for being the same in almost every light. They both believe in government medicine, the spending in these programs. They believe in the same foreign policy. They believe in the same monetary policy. They believe in the welfare system, too. So it's very bipartisan and they pretend there is this big difference, Paul said. Read more, The Emperor's New Clothes, the naked truth about the American police state. They say that all we have to do is put the Republicans in, and they'll go back to the Constitution, Paul said, explaining how the two-party system dupes Americans into throwing out old party every 4 years thinking the new one will be different. But, as Paul noted, that's a fallacy. After exposing the two-party system using the mainstream media, Paul went on to provide an actual solution to the problem of the American police and warfare state revolt. I think we need to have a real revolution someday and revolt against the type of system that we've had. And I don't think it's just this administration and the last one. I think it's happened for 100 years and most people realize we just didn't get here overnight, Paul said. After going off on the structure of the American political system and how it is deliberately designed to force dependence, the Fox panel came on to maintain the Republican talking points. However, immediately after, the former congressman chimed back in, saying, "Prepare for the bankruptcy." Paul explains how the reckless spending of every administration is leading to a point that will get rid of government dependency, but it will not be pretty. When the government goes broke and can no longer support the millions of people who've become dependent on its programs, chaos ensues. Paul proposes a very simple solution toward the end of the video that would undoubtedly shift the tide: legalize liberty. However, as Paul points out, while libertarians allow for voluntary socialism under their philosophy, but a socialist never permits voluntary freedom. Read more: Pentagon caught deceiving America, thousands of airstrikes hidden from public. It will take a revolution. While watching the video below, it becomes entirely clear as to why Paul, who has been out of government for years, is still relevant in the political spectrum, while Sanders, Obama, Mitt Romney, the Bushes, etc. have all but faded out entirely. Ron Paul was never a puppet and never compromised his principles for votes.
Hey Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County Cop Watch, and I wanted to explain what fair use is. You can use pieces of news articles if you're doing it for news reporting, you have commentary, and you're doing it for education purposes. So that's what fair use is, as you can see right here. Another reason why I wanted to make this video is to let you know I have just joined with Patreon. A nice thing with Patreon, I make no money on YouTube. They took the money away years ago, and so this is another way to give, and it's a nice thing too, because you can give monthly. You can give $1, $5, $10, whatever. I do 4 to 5 hours a day on trying to wake the sheeple up on how corrupt it is and different ways that you can fight the corruption. So Patreon is a way that you can do it, and then of course the old way is still there. Donate to Charlotte County Cop Watch with PayPal or credit card. So keep that in mind. 4 to 5 hours a day. I make no money, but the corruption happened to me and I'm sick of it, so I'm trying to wake people up. But my wife would love it if if we could get some help out there. There's 47,000 subscribers. Just think if each one of you subscribers just gave let's say actually yes, $1 a month. 47,000 subscribers gave $1 a month. That would be awesome. That's not going to happen. But anyways, that would be great if it did happen. But do the math in your head. Just think about it. Like I said, 4 to 5 hours a day. I get no money from YouTube. YouTube has gone nuts. You can't do anything anymore. They're taking the money away everywhere. So these are a couple different ways that you can still help out with all this time that I put in. And as you know, I'm in a special situation where, at least I can do it. 4 to 5 hours a day. We have a cleaning company during the day. That's what allows me to do this, and we're debt free. So this is my hobby. I don't go fishing and all that other crap. I try to save the world. So help me out to make the wife happy, man. In fact, if you guys did give $1 a day, and there was 47,000 of you, and you did it, and each of you gave $1, and that was every month, oh my God, yes, I could quit. I could start suing them. Another idea too that we have is if I got some funds, we could actually contact everyone that has been ticketed and or arrested and put in jail and start sending them postcards to let them know we're here, and to see if everything went all right, and if it didn't, find out their story. So we could even do more investigations and more lawsuits. Lawsuits take money. So just think about that. 47,000 of you so far right now. $1 a day. I mean, $1 a month on Patreon or $5 a month Patreon, 10, 20, whatever. Just do the math in your head, help out. This is a lot of work every single day. Thanks.